This is what Hamas is trying to do, or succeeding really with doing. Every time they hide inside hospitals or schools, they know that even though that's a war crime in itself, and even though they are brutal terrorists, eventually sympathy will lie with the Palestinians when Israel goes into these areas.
Israel described it as a precise and limited mission. It seemed very dramatic, shocking, if anything. A raid at a hospital in Khan Yunis, where yesterday their military claim they've captured dozens of terror suspects on a raid inside. This is southern Gaza's main hospital. Staff and patients inside the hospital were forced to flee under gunfire. Let's find out more. Jotam Confino is the foreign editor of Jewish News, just currently outside of Tel Aviv. Jotam, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie.
Can you just explain what happened yesterday?
Yes, I can indeed. So Israel had been preparing for this raid for about a week or so. In the past couple of days, they surrounded the Nasser hospital, which is the biggest hospital in southern Gaza. And about 4,000 patients and staff were inside the hospital up until Thursday, when about 4,000 of them were evacuated. But it seems as if around 1,000 were actually left inside the hospital, including patients and staff. And eventually, Israel simply barged in there. They went into the trauma center. They went into the entire hospital because they were suspecting that not only were Hamas terrorists inside the hospital, but also that there could be hostages or bodies of hostages. So that was the pretext of their raid. Now, they went in there, and of course, it's chaos if you go into a hospital. Anyone can tell themselves that that's going to be the result if you go into a hospital. And it was chaos. And one person was killed, according to local media, and several were wounded. But Israel also said that they arrested several Hamas suspects. So they found Hamas terrorists inside the hospital. They did not find hostages. And the reason why they thought that they could find hostages in there was because released hostages, those who were released in the November ceasefire, several of them have said that they were kept hostage inside this particular hospital. So that was the reason for them going in there.
Yeah, I mean, the director of the hospital described the situation as catastrophic. I think it's really hard to imagine exactly what that was like. From Israel's perspective, it is these type of incidents that they feel are necessary to try and defeat Hamas, that to the world, to their biggest allies, the US, the UK, I think it's understating it to say are deeply concerned by.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what Hamas is trying to do, or succeeding really with doing. Every time they hide inside hospitals or schools, they know that even though that's a war crime in itself, and even though they are brutal terrorists, eventually sympathy will lie with the Palestinians when Israel goes into these areas. Because when the world is seeing footage of soldiers inside hospitals or schools, people don't really care what the pretext is. It is the fact that there are patients, innocent people in there, civilians whose lives are endangered, who have nothing to do with this. And people simply, like I said, they have sympathy for the Palestinians. And this is part of Hamas's playbook, to hide inside these areas, despite it being war crimes, because they know eventually sympathy will lie with Palestinians and not with the Israelis.
In terms of people in Israel, are they supportive of what Netanyahu's doing?
Well, they're supporting not so much of Netanyahu, but they're supporting the Israeli army's operations in there. People are fed up, they are impatient, and they are really starting to be aggressive in their demonstrations to get the hostages out. And they absolutely support the army's operations in there. They don't care how they get the hostages out, if civilians are being killed in the process, because, as they say, we didn't start this war. We just want our people back. And especially when it comes to these areas like hospitals, there's not I'm yet to find an Israeli who says they should not go into these areas if they suspect that Hamas terrorists are inside the hospitals, but also, of course, if there are hostages in there. And according to Israel, Hamas has used over 85% of all medical facilities as during the war, simply been in there or been attacking Israel from inside the facilities. And this is, of course, a huge problem. And this is also why the European Union, but also the United States, have condemned Hamas for using these hospitals. It's not only Israel saying it's well documented that they are actually in these medical facilities. But nevertheless, Israel will continue to go into these areas as long as they suspect that hostages might be held there.
Jotam, thank you so much, as ever. We always really appreciate your insight analysis of what's happening. Jotam Confino, the foreign editor of Jewish News in Tel Aviv.